Hello, I'm Rachel Bevan from the Oncology Network, proud producers of the Oncology Journal Club podcast. Today's episode is an ASCO 2022 special. Craig Underhill talks to Jeannie Tie about all things ctDNA. Jeannie talks us through the dynamic trial, an overnight success only 12 years in the making. You'll find links to the paper, bios and Twitter handles in the notes on our websites. For regular news and podcast updates, we invite healthcare professionals to join us at oncologynetwork.com.au. It's free and it's a fantastic way to support the OJC. We hope you enjoy listening. This is Rachel Bevan and this is the Oncology Podcast.
Okay, so it's a great pleasure to welcome back to the Oncology Journal podcast Associate Professor Jeannie Tie, who is working at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute in Melbourne and Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute. Congratulations, Jeannie, on your presentation today on Dynamic, which we'll explain in a second. Opening my Twitter account this morning when I woke up, there was a whole heap on there about Dynamic and people saying it was really a plenary worthy paper. Have you had much feedback after the presentation?
Yeah. I think all positive feedback about how great the trials are. I've done quite a few interviews and even reporters are saying it's a great study. It's different to any other studies, innovative, looking at reducing use of treatment instead of keep giving new treatments and extending survival by a few months. So I think from the innovation point of view and from patient care point of view is a great study. So all positive feedback. And certainly I think I've been reading some of the Twitter, some of the patients were asking why is it now not part of standard of care?
Yeah, fantastic. So that's exactly right. My thoughts were when I read it, this is a every week question in an MDT or a clinic faced with a patient with stage 2 disease, which way are you going to jump? And so this helps us guide us now in that decision-making process. So let's get into it. Do you want to explain the outline of the study, Jeannie?
Yeah, so as you know, Craig, we both treat colorectal cancer. Stage 2 colon cancer is one of the, I guess, greatest clinical dilemma when it comes to advising patients whether they need chemotherapy or not and trying to describe to them and explain to them the benefit of having chemotherapy. What does 5% mean? What does 3% mean to the patient? And often I sort of give the patient the choice whether they have chemotherapy or not, thinking that, maybe it's up to them. And then they'll just come back to me and say, what would you recommend, doctor? And I find it really difficult to give them a truthful advice. So we really need better biomarker really to pick the patient who's more likely to relapse versus one who very unlikely to relapse and therefore unlikely to benefit from chemotherapy. So as you know, we've done, over the last 10 to 12 years, a lot of work in the ctDNA field, just really looking at ctDNA as a prognostic biomarker. So Dynamic is now taking that next step and say, can we use this test to guide therapy compared to standard care and improve patient outcome? And in this case, improving patient outcome is to reduce the number of patients needing chemotherapy, but not compromising their recurrence-free survival. So basically, the study randomized 455 patients across 23 Australian centres from 2015 to 2019. A group of patients were randomized to ctDNA guided management, where if they have a ctDNA positive result at either week 4 or 7 after surgery, they receive either fluoropyrimidine or oxaliplatin-based doublet chemotherapy at clinician's discretion. And the patient with a negative test at both week 4 and 7, they untreated, just undergo surveillance or observation. And then the other control arm is really your standard management arm where you don't get the ctDNA results and clinicians are basically managing the patient as per our current standard practice. So what we found was really ctDNA guidance could reduce the use of chemotherapy from 28%, which is the proportion in the standard care arm, down to 15%, which is the proportion of patients receiving chemotherapy in the ctDNA guided arm. So almost half the number of patients requiring chemotherapy, and did not compromise the recurrence-free survival. So the 2-year and 3-year recurrence-free survival was similar between the two arms. So we also meet our non-inferiority margin. Well, interestingly enough, Craig, the 3-year recurrence-free survival for both arms were above 90%. So clearly our stage 2 patients do really well because, surgical techniques improve. I can't remember the last time we had the patient with less than 12 lymph node yield. So surgical technique and qualities improve, our stagings improve. So, our stage 2 patient probably do really well. We quote the 80% in the past. That's probably, underquoting their recurrence-free survival.
In this study, it was a high 80s, wasn't it? Is it 3-year mark?
No, I think the 3-year recurrence-free survival, I need to quick reference here. I can't remember the numbers. The 3-year recurrence-free survival was around 92% for both arms.
92%. So that's fantastic. It's very reassuring that if these patients are ctDNA negative, you absolutely do not need to give them chemotherapy.
Oh, so that's across the board. And for ctDNA negative patient that didn't receive chemotherapy, because by protocol they don't, our 3-year recurrence-free survival was 92.5%.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And were there nuances within those stage 2? So, you're faced with a patient, they're stage 2, but sometimes they're T4, or, there's the old thing about the perforation or obstruction.
Yeah.
You were able to, I saw in the forest plots that all the subgroups benefited. So really we can probably say that if their ctDNA is negative, they're all okay not to give chemo to. There's no one particular group within that stage 2 that you still would?
Well, based on the forest plot for the recurrence-free survival, it actually appears that a T4 patient do better than T3. They actually benefit more from ctDNA guidance. That may be because they're all getting FOLFOX in the ctDNA guided arm. Now, hard to tease out. It may be because I think our study showed that the proportion of patients receiving chemotherapy, the proportion of patients receiving FOLFOX is higher than in the ctDNA guided arm than the standard management arm. And it's because clinician now knows that, ctDNA is such a bad prognostics marker that they're willing to give them FOLFOX chemotherapy. So about over 60% of patients were getting FOLFOX in the ctDNA guided arm, whereas only 10% are getting FOLFOX in the standard management arm. And so it may be that the recurrent survival benefit we're seeing in the T4 group in the forest plot is due to the use of FOLFOX for that reason. What we did look at recurrence-free survival in the ctDNA negative group untreated and stratify them by clinical risk and T stage. So, there is a difference in recurrence-free survival by clinical risk and T stage. So ctDNA negative patient, if you're T3, your recurrence-free survival is 94.2%, whereas if you're T4 and untreated ctDNA negative, your recurrence-free survival is 81.3%. So they don't do as well. But the question is, do they benefit from chemotherapy, the T4 ctDNA negative patient? That could be, a question maybe a future study can answer.
Yes.
It's going to be difficult to recruit a small number of patients, ctDNA negative T4. But, an ideal study will be to randomize your ctDNA negative T4 to chemo versus no chemo. 81.3% is still pretty good for T4. I thought without stratification with ctDNA, I just thinking historically, we're quoting probably recurrence rate about 60-70% for that group of patient.
Yeah.
For T4. They do worse than stage 3, right? Your T4 patients generally.
Yeah. So maybe the study, Jeannie, in those groups, if they're ctDNA negative in the T4s and then follow them serially, and if their ctDNA becomes positive, you give them early intervention.
Yeah, you can treat then. That's the other thing. Yeah. And the other thing is site of recurrence. That's something that we will be looking at as well. But I have a feeling that there's certain disease sites like peritoneal disease, we know that they don't shed as much DNA, certainly not into the circulation. And so that's where a lot of the false negative comes from, your patient with peritoneal disease. Then the counter argument is, does adjuvant chemotherapy really work to prevent peritoneal recurrence? We seem to think it's mainly for systemic distant recurrence. It reduces, but peritoneal maybe not so. So, are the patient we're missing out, will they benefit from systemic treatment anyway? They may not. Then you can still avoid chemotherapy in this patient if they're not going to benefit.
So tell us quickly about the trial itself, the ctDNA test, Jeannie, what that involves at the moment. Blood, I understand, goes off to Stanford, is that right?
Johns Hopkins. So we collaborate with Johns Hopkins University, Vogelsin's lab at the Ludwig Center at Johns Hopkins. So we've been collaborating with them for the last 12 years. So how it works is that, so this is what we call a tumor-informed assay. where each patient's tumor tissue was sent to them initially, and they analyzed for mutations in 15 genes that's recurrently mutated in colorectal cancer. For example, your APC, TP53, your RAS, your BRAF, PIK3CA, those common genes that's mutated in colorectal cancer. So they look for mutations in each patient's tumor, and they then, depending on what mutation they find, they then design a personalized assay for that particular patient. So patient X assay cannot be used for patient Y because it's specifically designed for them based on their mutation profile. So once they find the mutation tissue, then they look for the presence of those mutations in the patient's plasma sample at week 4 and 7 using the safe sequencing assay, which is a special assay designed specifically to detect this very, very low level mutation.
So how long does that take for that test to come back, and the cost at the moment, Jeannie, outside of a trial?
Turnaround from us shipping to them and the result coming back, it's around about 4 to 5 weeks at the moment. The cost, the test is not commercialized at the moment, but in the next few months it will be. In fact, will be a newer version, a better version of this test that will be commercialized. Now, the price, I don't know. It will be competitive with some of the commercial assay currently out there like Signatera and Guardant Health. But it will be a few $1,000s US. That's the ballpark.
It'll still need to go off to the US, presumably. It won't be a lab doing it in Australia?
So at this stage, when they first set up, it will go to the US. So I think I have been trying to convince them to come to Australia. That is the plan. Once they set up in the US and they work out the workflow and logistics better, there is plan to expand further, including Australia.
And I just thought we probably should talk briefly about this current study, Dynamic 3, which is in node positive, so stage 3 patients, and looking to use the ctDNA to either de-escalate the chemotherapy if they're ctDNA negative, or escalate the chemotherapy if they're positive. I think I've got that design right in my head. So that's a really exciting study too, Jeannie, because I think you mentioned about Dynamic was practical and, innovative and potentially practice changing. I think Dynamic 3 is another one as well, because it's really trying to answer the questions in real life sort of situation, how we should use this technology. So how's that study going?
It's going really well. So we're over 75% of the target recruitment. We wanted to recruit 1,000 patients. So last I hear, I think we're 780 something or so. We also have international partner from Canadian Cancer Trials Group who's recruiting really well as well. So I'm hoping that we'll reach our recruitment target by the end of the year, if not Q1 next year. So it'll be very exciting. We'll be hopefully also the first stage 3 trial to read out eventually. Adjuvant trial does take a long time. I'll retire by then, actually, Craig.
Good on you. Well, so look, congratulations on Dynamic. It's been amazing. I was just looking up, we had you previously on the podcast, Jeannie. So big congratulations, Jeannie, on today. I'm sure you're exhausted after today doing the media interviews and all that.
Yeah, I just have to have dinner and crash.
Yeah, and, it's an overnight success of at least 12 years in the making by the sounds of it. So like all these things, it's, many years of work, of innovation, hard work to get the study protocols up and running, to get them executed, get them recruited. So, well done. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, it wouldn't happen really without all the sites participating, 23 Australian sites. And for the Dynamic 3, I think we have 43 Australian sites in those studies. So it couldn't happen without everyone's participation and contribution. So it's really a teamwork from Australia and New Zealand. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what's the vibe of the meeting, Jeannie? Is it exciting to be there, or you're a bit nervous about being in a hall with 30,000 strangers from around the world?
I've had COVID 6 weeks ago, so I'm feeling invincible at the moment. So it's not so much a problem for me. I'm not wearing any mask, but I certainly think this year is not as busy as usual. I hear that it's about 20,000 people, and usually they get about 40. I'm so happy to see each other and see colleagues. I think it's live just as usual as per ASCO. Some are wearing masks, some are not.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure the people who've escaped getting it so far are probably wearing masks. So,
yes, indeed.
And you get to go out tonight and have a nice dinner in Chicago?
Yes, I'm going out tonight with a group. And then tomorrow I'm having a celebratory dinner with one of my colleagues. And I don't know which restaurant, is a surprise.
Fantastic. Oh, anything else caught your eye today in the GI space, or you didn't have time really to get to see?
I didn't have time. I had to do a lot of interviews afterwards. So I didn't really actually have time to go to the poster session and also missed the poster discussion this afternoon. So I couldn't really comment, but I'm excited to see what the orals have to bring on Monday and the plenary tomorrow about more anti-EGFR in the first line, left versus right.
Yeah. What's that all about? That'd be interesting.
I don't know. We'll wait and see. Hopefully there may be something interesting.
I wonder if that was an example of some bit of data dredging in subsets or something, but I don't know. We'll see.
I guess Penny's not been used. It's not been done in the first line. So this is the first study with panitumumab. The other two, 5-3 and CLGB, were with cetuximab. And also, this is probably the first study with Folfox, 5-3 with sulfuri.
I just remember too, Eva sent me a text in the middle of the night. You got a question from Vogel, New York.
Vogel, New York, me and him are best friends. He always comes to my session.
Yeah.
And he comes to my poster previously and come and ask. He's very interested in ctDNA. Yeah.
Fantastic. So he's a friend of the podcast. We've had him on a few times.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Next time we should have a panel.
Yeah. Oh, you're on.
Yeah. We should definitely have a panel discussion.
Do you remember what he asked you?
Today or yesterday?
I'd just gone to bed, so it must have been during your session. And she sent me a photo, and it was Vogel
asking about mutation predicts for chemotherapy benefit. Was it him?
Got a photo. It was microphone 2.
Gosh, I can't remember.
You don't remember? I'm sure your head spinning doing all that.
A little bit. I'm just tired. So I had a education session yesterday as well, which had a lot of questions as well. So I'm getting them a bit confused about the questions. Oh, what did he ask? I have to ask Eva. She might remember.
Yeah, I will. Good on you. Well, your life is fulfilled now. I've been asked a question by Vogel, New York.
Not till I do a panel with him on your, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get him on.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Definitely. That's a date.
So, Jeannie, I hope you get to have a nice dinner tonight, nice glass of wine or champagne in celebration. Congratulations. Concurrent New England Journal paper. We'll put the link to that as well. I just had a read of that over my breakfast this morning. It's great. It's easy to understand. Paper, well written, well done. Lots of regional Australians contributed to the writing of that as well. So that's nice.
Yes.
So episode 30, we did a ctDNA special. So for anyone listening wants to brush up on this whole field of ctDNA, that could be a good starting point. Have a listen to episode 30. Fantastic. Enjoy the rest of the meeting and we'll hopefully catch up soon.
Thank you, Craig.
You've been listening to the Oncology Podcast. If you enjoyed today's edition and would like to subscribe, head over to our website, oncologynews.com.au, and sign up to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.